Awesome. Well, as the initial slide says, welcome everyone to the Orlando Tug meeting for July 2021. We have a great set of things in store for everyone today. So looking forward to our session. Let me go ahead and kind of get us moving along with our slides. Of course, I think those of you who have been attending our TUG meetings are familiar with our leadership team. A lot of us will be here today. You'll see us in the chat. We'll try to be as engaging as absolutely possible. And you know, why we do these sessions is we really do have a passion for Tableau. We have a passion for data, and we want to learn as much as we can about all of that. You can reach us at orlandotug@gmail.com. So we encourage those of you who are tuning in, if there's something you would like to see, if there's a tip that you're looking for, you know, we certainly don't know everything, but with our combined skills, we can definitely help. And you know, with Ben joining us today, Ben is, you know, one of the examples of the connectivity that this group does have to our larger data family. And that data family has, I mean, like unlimited resources to help. So if you want to see something, you want to do something, if you have something you want to share, you know, all of those things, we're excited to give you opportunities to present here and to connect with all of us. So please do reach out. Our mission, again, is to really drive Tableau's overall mission, and Tableau helps people see and understand data. And so here you can connect with like-minded data rock stars. I know I'm speaking for myself personally, Wells Fargo has a huge environment of Tableau folks, and we don't connect very well within our own business because everything is so segmented. I've actually made far more connections to our data family through the Orlando Tableau user group. And that's really the mission of this group, is to connect all of us as one big family focused around data. So that's our goal, and we really mean it when we ask you guys to connect with us. So help us connect with you. Tableau Public and your LinkedIn profile, if you want to drop that into the chat today, we'll be reaching out that way. We also ask for that info when you register, so if you've done that there, you know, that's absolutely fantastic, and we're glad that you've done that. So with that, that's kind of our, you know, intro. And today we have somebody who's just, you know, really been a big proponent for data literacy. Ben, I know at one point worked at Tableau before starting his own business as the founder and CEO of Data Literacy. And he has a passion for data, but then beyond data, you know, he really wants to help people learn to tell that story. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our guest speaker today, Ben Jones. So Ben, feel free to take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you to the entire leadership team, Katie, Yamil, Andrew. You know, I used to actually run the Los Angeles Tableau user group. I think it was a decade ago, 2011, 2012. So I know how much work goes into it. And that was only for me to try to get 5 people in a room. So now we have over 50. And I know obviously exactly that there's so much work that goes into coordinating, planning, lining up speakers and all the rest. So thank you to you for putting in all that work, as well as to Alyssa, who's on the call from Tableau, setting up the Zoom session and all the rest, really helping to make Jeff, Katie, Yamil, and Andrew's job a little easier. So I very much appreciate all that, as well as a chance to be able to speak with you all today and to go through some of the fun things I like to talk about as we make data engaging and help people learn to speak the language of data, as we like to say here at Data Literacy, my business. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. We're going to have a little raffle at the end, and I think there'll be a winner of, there's actually already a winner in the audience of one of my courses. And that's pretty rare for me. It's actually, you know, we don't give them away all that often. So Christos Giannoulis just sent me a quick message in the chat, and he had won the course back when we did a giveaway, I think if I'm not mistaken, for immigrants. I am one. I was born in Canada, moved to the United States when I was 8 years old and have been here ever since. Just recently got my citizenship, and to celebrate that, we gave away courses. So we've been doing that from time to time. And we're going to give away a course here as well as a book to a random group winner here. So stay tuned to the end for that. In the meantime, I want to walk you through some content that I'm really passionate about. It's about how do we communicate data well with one another, to one another. And so I'm going to go through some tips, hopefully some examples that maybe make that more interesting and relatable. We've even got some Orlando data in there. So I had a chance to visit Orlando. It's been a few times now, I guess, in my life, but I was there for a conference with a bunch of journalists a few years ago. And so we were taking a look at some data from the open data portal there in the city of Orlando. And some of those examples actually made it into one of my books. So we'll probably touch on that a bit. So that's a bit of a preamble. So communicating well, tips on how to get your data's message across. A bit about me. Thanks for the introduction, Jeff. I do lead a business now called Data Literacy at dataliteracy.com. I spent 6 or 7 years at Tableau, actually, running the Tableau public platform as well as the academic programs team. So I got a chance to work with journalists, the community, also professors and students, and a whole long list of people that I really learned a lot from over the years as we sought to help them both learn in the classroom with academic programs as well as tell the data stories on the web with Tableau Public. So that's a bit about me and my background. I was teaching at the time at the University of Washington and got hooked on this bug of helping people have their aha moment with data, where they become confident with data, maybe for the first time ever, and realize that no more need to be data phobic or afraid of data. They too can make good use of it and engage in this dialogue that's happening more and more all around us every day as organizations, and not just organizations, but society in general, tries to use data to have conversations with each other, sometimes more effectively than other times. And so to the degree that we can, with our business and with your help, many people, I think, need to get involved in order to drive data literacy around the world. So that's what we're doing today. I also like hiking and backpacking. We're going to hit the trails this coming weekend. We're trying to pick the trail. The one we were going on probably won't work for our little dog. So we're going to remap and go to a different spot. We got a trip on the coast coming up here, and do a kayak camping trip where we actually put our tents and sleeping bags and everything in the little portals of the kayak and then paddle on out to a camping spot. So those are the things I like to do, and I balance out the digital side with something in nature. Really is my thing. I can see the chat here too, so feel free to comment as we go along. Would love to know a bit about you and also maybe some of your hobbies, just for fun. Feel free to drop that into the chat. It's nice for me to get to know some of the people that I'm presenting to, so that it's not me talking at a camera and a microphone, but actually engaging. So so make it as engaging and interactive as you want it to be, and I'd be happy to do that. And thank you, Rildo, for your for the congrats there. Also, is that the Jay Lewis? I think it is. So there's a Jay Lewis in the chat. Is that you, Jay? So there's a Jay Lewis that I know, and he and I interacted on Twitter many times. Actually, we have, but one time he sent me some particularly dirty data. I might talk about that in a moment. That comes up. So and it made it into my book, and immortalized his kid's diaper changing schedule. There he is. Hey, Jay. Nice to see you. Yeah. That it was a daughter. It's a daughter, right? And she's probably...
she's 3 now, actually.
Okay. So out of diapers. So we're past that phase. Yeah. So that's actually a fun data set, and it relates to another one. We may see if I can pop that up. I'll have to go off script and off slides and all that. But how's she doing?
Oh, she's doing great. She actually just finished up potty training. We didn't collect any data on that though. So,
so much dirty data to collect about that. And is she going to be going to preschool here in the fall, or I guess another year maybe until that?
Yeah,
right?
we've already got her she's in a Montessori program now. So
nice.
She's in full time.
Great.
Loving it. So.
That's awesome. Yeah, I really feel for all the parents that had little ones. I have teenagers. They're all high schoolers. That presented its own challenge during the pandemic, including mysterious screens no longer on windows in the middle of the night. And, wonder what that all meant, including a pair of shoes right below the window. But yeah, so little ones, parents of little ones, that was really tough, wasn't it? To actually expect, as well as for the teachers, to engage with those little kids here, like on Zoom. What a challenge we've all been through here in the past year and a half. So I hope that you and your loved ones got through it okay and were able to make the most of, I think, what was a very challenging and has been and in many ways continues to be a challenging situation. We were just chatting before starting about, are people going back to work? Are they still remote? And so it's all kind of a jumble at this point, isn't it? And thank you, Jackie. I appreciate the congrats there. Yeah, it's nice to be an American citizen. You know, I lived here for so many years as a Canadian citizen, as a permanent resident, and finally decided I'd go for it. So did that. And, you know, right before, actually, so it was October of 2019. So right before, I think for a while they stopped because they couldn't do the ceremonies and, you know, anyway, wow, just got that done in time. So 15 years. Yeah. Raj Beer, yeah. So 15, some people are working on that for a long, long time, getting green cards, getting citizenship. It's a process. And it's, you know, it involves a lot of time and effort and funds to make it happen. So, all right, so let's dive into the presentation today. A bit about me too. I do like writing about data. I find that I learn a lot when I work with it, and I try to capture and share those thoughts in book form. Some people like reading books, not everyone, but for the folks that like reading books, that's a great way to learn. We've also started turning the last couple books here into courses, so you can actually go online and take those courses. And again, the goal here is to help people speak the language of data. We're trying to find ways to make that content something that people are willing and actually excited to go through and to use to improve their own knowledge and skills, so that their attitudes and behaviors might help them get to the next level, you know, in their careers and such. And also, we have a lot of problems to solve in society. So it isn't just about getting ahead in our job or helping big companies get even bigger. It's also about dealing with some of the issues that we're facing here, and hopefully trying to find a way to get back to doing that together, even though we don't always have to agree, right? We still do have to find a way to move forward and make progress and solve problems together. So I think data can be a part of that if we work at it. Okay, so here are our tips, right? So boom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, presentation's over. No, we'll go through each one of these little by little. And just some things I've learned over the years. We're gonna drip in there some content from some of the books and the courses. This is really the second time I've delivered this presentation. The first time was to another Tableau user group. I think it was Northern Virginia. They asked me to deliver this presentation. I put it together for them. And this is the second time I get to give it. I've customized it quite a bit for you all to show some Orlando data, also to add some of the content we've added to the level 1 course since the last time I presented this data. And it's nice to see folks putting their LinkedIn messages in there in the chat. That's really cool that you all can connect with each other. And I'm going to try to find a way to go back and find those too. And I'll try to drop mine in there here in a minute. So I'm a big believer that it's important for us, before we're going to communicate data at all, you know, we need to know the data. We need to actually know it, like really be familiar with it. All of its quirks and nuances and kinks and oddities, what's powerful about it, what's confusing about it. It's sort of like, I learned from journalists to interview your data, like you're sitting down with any source and going through a list of questions to try to understand more about, in an interview, the person. But in our case, we're trying to understand what data is telling us about our environment. And a lot of that you can glean from the data itself, but not all, right? We also need to go to the source. We also need to talk to the people that collect the data. How is it measured? What are some interesting properties of the way that it's been gathered and stored? Are there calculations involved? If so, what are those formulas? Are there things that aren't included in the data that could be relevant as well? So those are all questions that we need to ask as we really endeavor, first and foremost, to know our data. So when we teach the level 2 program, which is really all about rolling up your sleeves and working with raw data, there's a key step, and this is our flowchart we teach. And one of those steps is the first one here. And the second, you can see kind of column in this flowchart is just this idea that we need to explore the contours of our data. This is a phrase that I heard many years ago in a Twitter conversation with a great friend of mine here in the state of Washington. His name is Michael Mixon. And you can find him on Twitter at MixPix. And he works, I think, with Pluralsight right now, helping them with their data. And that phrase really stuck in my mind. It seems so appropriate that we need to actually go through the process even before we do analysis, right? It's almost like a precursor to analyzing the data, is just to explore the contours of the data. Almost like if you were to start by walking the perimeter, or if you're going to discover an island and find out about that island, to actually go all the way around its perimeter maybe. Actually, I just read this morning, there's a gentleman in the UK who's trying to paddleboard all the way around the coast of the UK. So he'll be very familiar with the coastline, right, by the time that he's done. And actually, it's funny because that actually is very true, that it has actually happened in history. This question about how thorough are you exploring the perimeter of a thing, in fact, an island, happened in a certain place in the world that I want to tell you about. And that place in the world is, oddly, not shown in any of these maps. Does anybody know what it is? So there's a place on the planet, and there are probably multiple places, but there is one place that is not shown in any one of these 6 maps. Go ahead and fill in your guess in the chat. And it's actually notoriously missing on many, many maps. Yeah, Jay nailed it. It's New Zealand. So do you know there's an entire Tumblr, I think there are Reddit pages where people rage against world maps that do not include the country of New Zealand. And there are many of them. They're all over the place. It's at least in a common projection of the globe, it would then be kind of in the bottom right corner, which somehow gets cropped out. Speaking of New Zealand and its place on a map, did you know that the first European to stumble on the island of New Zealand was Abel Tasman? He was traveling along there, and he came across this place. Actually, it was already inhabited by the Maori people at the time, 1642. And so he mistakenly, what he did was you see this little area right here, kind of in the middle, it's a little notch, right? He called that a bight. He called it Zeehane's Bight, after his ship, the Zeehane. There were 3 ships that were sailing with him, and one of them was called the Zeehane. So he called this little inlet here, this notch in the coastline, Zeehane's Bight. I didn't really know what a bight was. I don't think it's something we commonly use, or at least maybe non-cartographers might not know that phrase. But this is actually the coastline where I grew up in Ventura County, actually going all the way down to San Diego County off the coast of California. And you can see it's a bight. It's kind of this like, it's like a B-I-T-E, almost like someone had taken a bite out of the land. It's a long gradual bend, right? And so that's what he called this area right here, okay? It is not called that today. It is not called that today. Today, does anybody know what it's called? What is that area here in New Zealand called? Is anyone familiar with the country? I've never been there. It is literally at the top of my list of places I want to visit when I can. So it is actually, I'll tell you, because I didn't know, I don't expect you to know, but it happens to be called Cook Strait. So about over a century later, after Tasman came along, James Cook sailed around the islands, and he realized, as you can see here if we zoom in, that it is not a bight. It is not a bight at all, because it actually has a navigable passage, a waterway that separates the north and the south islands, not island, of New Zealand. He didn't know that, and you can see why. He probably just cruised right on by and missed this little gap here, okay? So there we go, right? So he didn't really explore the contours of his data as thoroughly as he could have or should have, certainly not as thoroughly as James Cook did, and he found a null in the data sets. He found a gap or a missing value there. There was no land between these 2 places, and now that's called Cook Strait. Okay, so that's the same thing when we work with data. You want to consider yourself an explorer. You want to consider the data set, you're New Zealand, and you're trying to figure out what's there. And you don't want to miss anything. You don't want to see maybe something that's there that you don't notice, right? Because that would make your presentation perhaps misleading or deceiving. And that's, of course, something we would absolutely want to avoid. Not everyone does, and that's a matter of ethics, but I'm assuming that everyone here in the session, as well as on listening in the recording, is only interested in helping people understand the truth. And so I think that's an important thing to commit to. So here is what we teach, right? There are 10 questions that are very specific and not just talking about ships in New Zealand and whatnot. That's a nice preamble or introduction to the concept, but we really want to get specific as we talk about this concept of exploring the contours of your data. So let's give a fun little example here. If we go to Wikipedia and we want to know, US presidents, for example, let's just look up US presidents. Okay, let me ask you a question, right? If we take a look at this little table right here, I'll just pull it up live. Here's a list of the presidents of the United States. Okay, so take a look at this now. Here's our little table here, right? Actually, you know what, for fun, you all know this trick already, but I'll just do it just for kicks and grins. So if we take a look at Google Docs here. Let me switch over to my work account and we will go to Google Sheets. You all know this trick, right? This import HTML. So I can go in here. This is just a little aside, a little fun little way. We scrape data from the web all the time, don't we? Import HTML, open parentheses, quote, paste that link in there, comma, table. I want the table. Which one? I think it's probably the first one. Let's find out. So then I put that in there, I hit enter. And we get our little table in here. It looks like the first one is not exactly the one I'm looking for. So I'm going to, if we want to know for sure, we can kind of take a more close look at the HTML here. But yeah, we've got our little table here, right? President, Washington, Adams, Jefferson. There we go, right? Yeah, it's a fun little, I'll just paste this into, it doesn't happen to be actually such a great version here. I think it's a highly formatted version. Excel can do this only if you're working with the Windows version of Excel, by the way. If you're on a Mac like me, then it does not work, but there is a get data from the web function in Microsoft Excel that lets you do something very, very similar. And I think probably, yeah, with Power Query Editor, you can also do something similar here. Okay, so there we go. I just wanted to kind of just illustrate that as a fun little side tip. But let me ask you, put into the chat, what is the meaning of a row? Or what's another way to ask the question in a more clear way? How would you define a row? What defines a row of this table? You think about it in terms of like the granularity of a database. It's important for us to understand what a record means, right? So what is a record in this little table here? And like, for example, if I'm dealing with a work data set and it's talking about calls to a helpline, well, I might say every record is a call, a distinct phone call that was placed with a pickup and a hang up. Yeah, so I thought similarly to some of the folks in the chat, and that is that each row is a president, right? Is a person. Each row is a person. It's a different person. Okay, every single row, different person. That was my assumption early on as well. Every row is a different person. So my analysis then, as I began to look into it, I was actually interested in knowing the lifespan of these presidents. When did they? How many years did they live? And so I actually merged it with another data set that shows their birthdays and the day that they died, and so forth. And then I used Tableau to just simply look at the difference between the day they died and the day they were born, divided by 365, or just compute, their age. What are the number of years that they lived? And so here's what I got, right? So well, something's sticking out like a sore thumb. That is the best scenario, by the way, when we make a mistake and we fall into a pitfall and the data screams at us, you made a mistake. Because clearly Grover Cleveland did not live to be 142 years old, right? Yeah, because Julian nailed it. Each row is for a presidential period in the United States. And Grover Cleveland happened to have two different presidencies separated by Benjamin Harrison's term. So that's an interesting tidbit in the data set. I would need to scroll down and notice that. And I didn't notice it. And actually, it would be probably hard to. But I think a clue is that we can see on the left-hand side, it's a presidency. Okay, sometimes it's 4 years, sometimes it's 8 years, sometimes it's even more, right? In some of the earlier times, right, and for a very short amount of time. So it's not even the same. It isn't like you could say, oh, it's a 4-year period, right? No, it might be an 8-year period. It might be less in the case of a president who died in office or was assassinated, like JFK. So the row is not defined by a specific period of time. The row is not defined by a specific person and their name. The row is defined by the number or the term. That's why, well, if you say Biden is if I say to you, which president was he, right? In terms of okay, let me ask it a different way. How many human beings, how many people before Biden have been president of the United States, right? And most people would say, oh, well, 45, because he's number 46. But it's actually not. It's actually 44, and he's the 45th person. And that is exactly because Grover Cleveland appears twice in 2 different rows in the data set. Okay, so in any case, that I really wouldn't have been aware of unless I looked closely at the data and asked myself, what is the meaning of a record or a row? Super important to really come to terms with that, right? It might not be what we think it is. Gia says, could be identified by finding out if there are duplicates in the data. Exactly. So I could look for, and in a way, that's what this did, not quite, but I could have looked for the number of records, for example. I do that a lot. I'll just take a look at, let's just for fun, show exactly what that would look like. This is a different data set, Orlando crime, but I can take a look, for example, and say, well, my assumption is that, let's see, case number, okay? That looks like it might be a unique identifier. So I can put that out there and look at the number of records of all of these cases of crime in Orlando. How many were there, right? So are there cases where maybe, for example, there's a record that had 2. Another way to look at that is to do a distinct count. We can say, well, how many records are there and what's a distinct count of one of those variables? Distinct counts are a little onerous on Tableau and its engine. So maybe I'll just look at that once and then take it off, right? But I can hold down Option here on a Mac and drop it onto text, case number, and just do a distinct count right here, 181,000. And then I can also maybe drop the number of records onto there and see that it's the same. And sorry if that's really small. Sometimes I can double tap and zoom in. No, not letting me do that now. Or I can actually just probably increase the font size, right? Why not? Let's just make that bigger. You can probably all read it, but let's just make sure you can. So the distinct count of the location of the case number is the same. Now, this is an important step to take, this exact step. Maybe you can visualize it if you're like me. This is the first thing I thought to do. Some maybe more SQL type fans might do it something more like this. Where we're kind of doing a quick check. We're trying to do a gut check. Is it what we think it is? We'll come back to this data set here in a moment, but that's one of the steps, right? Of looking for those little notches in the coastline, like Cook did with New Zealand, right? Another one of these steps, and you can see other things we do, counting the number of records. We just sort of did that, counting the number of variables that are there, looking at their types. We're going to come back to this idea of scale types. Also looking to see if one of them is unique. We just did that. There's an important step about boundaries where we see what are the min and the maxes of some of the quantitative variables. So for example, if I were to show you data from crime in Orlando, I might say, oh, well, this is on the rise, right? Look at that. Crime is going up and up in Orlando, right? That's my story. That's my message. And it might be very deceiving because in this case, I've picked a range, a min and a max dates that happen to be part of an overall declining trend. There's just a small region within it where crime definitely did increase, but if I expand out those mins and maxes, I see that I have a completely different story to tell about crime in Orlando that is actually dropping and has been for the better part of a decade, okay? And this is a little dated. This is going back to 2018, I think. So again, looking at those mins and maxes is so important. It's oftentimes, we find, by the way, especially with time, that when we get to the max, we're dealing with an incomplete period. Like maybe we have data for only a few months out of the year, and it looks like there's this big drop off. Well, that might just be an artifact of the fact that some of those time periods are not complete yet. Also at the beginning of the data set, same thing. Maybe we're looking at weekly data. Well, guess what? Week 1, you started collecting it on a Wednesday. Maybe that was the first day of the year. January 1st was on a Wednesday. So that means that first week is going to be a partial week. And it's going to give you the impression that you had a big jump at the beginning, where actually it's just more related to those time periods. And are they full or not? Those questions are important to ask. And that's an important step to take a look at that. By the way, what I love, that's one of the things I do love about Tableau Prep, is that you kind of get that ability. If I just pop it open real quick, for some reason, it always makes me register. Does anybody else have that problem? I had to roll back on an earlier version of Tableau Prep because the newer ones were really giving my computer fits, but that's probably just me. I don't know. I love this product. It's part of my workflow. And one of the great things about it to me is sometimes I use it when I have no intention of joining or cleaning or unions or pivoting or anything. I simply want to know what the data set looks like. That's what I want to do, So I might connect to data. Let's just pick a random data set that pops up high up on my list here. Let's see, actually, you know what? I think maybe we can find some good COVID data, but I don't necessarily want to interact with it yet. I just want to, what I try to do is just get a sense of what's going on. So here's COVID. It's probably a big data set, so it might kind of chug a bit. US counties recent. Let's look at that. So this is looking at, okay, register. There's my address, everybody. Oh no, good thing it doesn't have my address. So there we go. I registered again, every time. All right, so here we go. I'm in Tableau. And like I said, all I really want to do here is just add a step. And in that step, I'm using this middle pane, right? I can see the raw data down here. I can see what a row is. I can then start to interact with this and just get that bird's eye view of the data to conveniently explore its contours. That's all I want to do. I do this all the time. Add step, check it out, and I'm out because it's a shortcut for me to be able to explore it. And inevitably, we find that there is some gap between our data and reality. And this is brought up in the book, Avoiding Data Pitfalls, that I mentioned. Jay's daughter's diaper changing schedule can be found in that book. So this idea that, and as an aside, the funny thing about that data set is it's very similar in shape to randomly when pilots voluntarily report that their aircraft hit a bird or something like that. And so you'll have to read the book to find out why those data sets would have a similar shape at all. And it's interesting, and it relates to this question, of how was the data collected, being familiar with that, understanding the process even that someone followed to collect and report the data, and what were the tools they used, what did they have at their disposal when they came up with that data. Okay, lots of questions there, but every single data set you'll ever interact with, has a gap. Every variable is a proxy, is sort of the way I think about it. It isn't really exactly what I want to look at. It's, what I can in many cases look at, which is hopefully close to what it is I want to measure. Okay. So knowing the data, a huge part of that is exploring its contours, getting that out of the way up front. And then of course, what I love about Tableau is that it allows us to pivot very quickly, to look at the data from a number of different angles, finding those things that stand out, that are maybe not looking like they belong or presenting themselves, flagging us. Those help us to discover errors in the data set, and there will be errors in your data. You know that. And so how do you find that? Well, visualizing it can be an effective way to find it. Also, knowing your audience. And I want to show you, there's a few things in this presentation that come from one really fabulous book that I highly recommend you go buy. It's called Visualization Analysis and Design. It's by a researcher named Tamara Munzner. She's at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, and she's also on my board of advisors. She's a good friend and she's brilliant. Randomly, and maybe kind of, actually not randomly, interestingly, she was in Chris Stolte's PhD class along with him as fellow PhD candidates at Stanford. And as you know, Stolte was one of the 3 co-founders of Tableau, and really the genius behind VizQL and this visualization engine. And the two of them know each other very well and have gone to really change the world, in their own different ways. One by forming a company, the other by conducting some of the most important research in the field and capturing and distilling some of those important concepts into a textbook that is so helpful. And actually she's very generously put a lot of her diagrams into the public domain, Creative Commons license. And so we've, with her blessing, used some of those in our courses in an attempt to make some of that graduate level content easy for everyone to understand. That has been our goal. But one of the things she talks about in the book is this diagram right here. And it's all about knowing your audience. Yes, thank you, Julian. The diagrams were made by Eamon Maguire in Switzerland. And Eamon and Tamara partnered together to find, as what you'll see here, some graphically clear and compelling ways to capture some of these concepts that are so important for us all to understand. One of them is this, and you can see it's like an onion. It has layers and there's a core. And so this is all about understanding your audience, right? In order for us to communicate data well, we need to know who we're presenting to. Well, there are some things we can specifically look at in order to know who we're presenting to. And this framework, it's called task abstraction and validation. It sounds very technical and academic-like, but I'll just break it down for you and make it simple. We can start off at the top, right? So let's imagine we start at the top here. The idea is that you go down from the top into the middle, and then from the middle, we'll see what happens next. But from the top down, we're doing what's called abstraction. That's where you take something specific, like an observation of an event or an object, and you convert it into something more general that applies beyond that specific event or object. Abstraction. You're taking something specific, you're extracting what can apply more generally. And we do that by going down the layers of this onion. What you end up with at the end there is a design, is a prototype, is something to test and validate. Now we come out of the center or the core of this onion, and we go back down through, as you'll notice, the exact same layers wrap around, don't they? And now we're going to go down through the same layers, only from the point of view of testing and validating what we've created: a dashboard, a slide deck, a chart, a presentation. Also products. This applies to products as well. We're going to look at it from the point of view of someone creating a data story or data presentation. So at the top, we can see we've got, the domain. Who are the people that we're talking about or talking to? What do they care about and why? Then we go down the next level and we try to find out what are they trying to accomplish? What are their tasks that they're carrying out? And what data are they using and what data is needed for them to complete that task? Next layer in is the encoding and the interaction. What is a way to marry the data with their visual cortex by encoding it, giving them a message they can easily decode, creating an experience they can interact with potentially if need be in order to get a question answered and hopefully carry out their task. And then there's this kind of quirky technical one in the middle where we actually look at the algorithm like, well, how does this thing actually work? I mean, what are the pixels involved? Is it designed for use on a phone or a tablet or a desktop? How long does it take to refresh? How often is the data updated? All these technical questions of the plumbing of the chart or dashboard or tool get brought into the view now. And we look at understanding how to build an experience for them that's going to work. Like imagine a real estate agent, right? Well, who are they? They're a real estate agent and they're trying to help their clients find a home that fits their ideal scenario. And why are they doing that? Well, they obviously make money doing that if they're successful. And obviously they get perhaps some emotional satisfaction out of that whole process. What data are they looking at? Maybe listings. What task are they trying to carry? Maybe they're trying to get them in their car and get them to as many properties as they can in a certain amount of time on a weekend, perhaps. That's their goal. That's their task. How are we going to encode that? Clearly, there's going to be some map. Maybe there's going to be some driving directions. Maybe there's going to be the ability for them to filter that list based on the couple as they hone in on their ideal traits, close to a school, number of bedrooms, we've all been there. How does it work? Well, this is a key question, because if I'm a real estate agent and I pick up that couple and their little baby at their home, and then we start driving to the first house, and lo and behold, it's already sold, and so is the second one and the third one, I'm going to come back and I'm going to say, your amazing visualization that's obeying all of the proper laws of visual encodings is no good for me. It created a really unfortunate experience. And you say, oh, well, we just updated it. We update it twice a week. Is that okay? No, because all the homes in a market like today are gone. And so it's useless for me, right? So that whole process I'm talking about is the step of going back down through and validating, right? Having them look at it and try it, doing studies, putting it in the field, and then ultimately seeing if they adopt. Those are all questions. If you are in the business of building dashboards, you know what I'm talking about. Well, when we're talking about a data presentation, we have to ask ourselves, what is the channel or modality whereby we are interacting with this audience? Now, take a look at it this way. There are so many ways we interact with people, right? Like this, in a presentation, you in the chat. We've got books right here, where that's also a way of telling a data story in a book. And how you approach those scenarios based on the limitations and constraints of each one of those modes of interacting can define what the data story looks like. Is this a conversation we're having? Well, I'm speaking to you and it's only one person. That's very different, for example, than if I'm speaking to, like in this scenario, a limited group. This is the Orlando Tableau user group, right? So it's a private webinar. And you say, oh no, they're recording it, so it's going to get posted. So maybe this is actually, should I think of it as speaking to the general public? Perhaps, right? So those are things to take into consideration. How are you interacting with them? Are you not able to add any notes or text or say a word? Well, maybe all you can do is give them a chart or a dashboard or something. That's it. Well, can I also add my notes in writing? Perhaps that would then change how I approach communicating with you. I can add annotations. I can write a whole blog post around the chart and explain to you what it's about. Maybe I can include it in an email with copy and pasting some images or slacking things to you, right? These are all different ways. So I guess the question for you to ask yourself is, how am I interacting with my audience members? And what does that afford me in the way of opportunity? What does it also in what other way does it limit me? A great paper about data storytelling by Jeffrey here when he was at Stanford. I'll put the link in the chat here if I can. Let me go back. He talks about different genres of narrative visualization. Yeah, and I'll put this in. This is a paper. If you are interested in it, I highly recommend you take a look at it. About a little over 10 years ago, they took a look at data journalism, which started to really grow. And they said, what are the different ways people are packaging their data stories? Maybe is it a magazine, or is it just an annotated chart? Maybe it's a slideshow like this one, or a comic strip like we just had Ali Torban design for our blog. And I'm trying to get a different idea out using a different way of communicating, right? So different genres of narrative visualization. That's something to think about. Okay, number 3, well, we need to get to the place where the chart itself, and this is where we get into the nuts and bolts of chart building. And this is all about what learning to see data is all about, data literacy level 1. Our goal is to make everyone expert chart readers and interpreters. And part of that actually helps them embrace and understand the concepts behind encoding our data. So a lot of times people start with a chart chooser. Hey, which chart should you pick for a given situation? And we get into a lot of different chart types, which you can see here in this diagram. But before we start talking about chart types at all, we start to kind of lay the groundwork for the building blocks. The fact that, well, first of all, we're taking a table and we're turning it into points, lines, or areas. Maybe volumes, but rarely. Probably maybe more and more as we start to see VR and AR evolving and maturing. But today, most of the data we're consuming, we're doing that on a 2-dimensional screen or page. And so we typically limit ourselves to 0D, 1D, 2D. Okay, 3D we usually leave out. Someone just mentioned Mona Chalabi. Yeah, she's amazing. Oh, Andrew did. Yeah, she's really, really great. I had a chance to meet her at a Tapestry conference we ran. And yeah, she does a great job using the cartoon or comic or sketch illustration style. And it really is effective. You'll see teenagers on TikTok talking about her charts. Well, that's an accomplishment, right? It's an important one, actually, that we can reach out to people that way. And part of what she's doing is being creative about these encodings, hopefully in a way that still conveys the truth and the true proportions behind the data that she's showing people so that they are not misled or confused. But that process involves you as a data communicator, taking your data, putting it into form like this, encoding different visual channels, position, angle, shape, and size, and using two very important principles, expressiveness and effectiveness. And Jock McInlay, who is one of the first employees hired by the founders of Tableau, he lives here not too far away from where I'm sitting, was a researcher and talked about this idea of expressiveness and effectiveness. And I want to really kind of explain it. Before I do, I mean, obviously we need to kind of embrace the fact that there are different data scale types, a nominal scale type, that's just the name of something, like a country name or gender. Ordinal, that's different. Now the levels of the category have an order to them, like Olympic medal, gold, silver, bronze. Quantities can be broken down into interval and ratio. Interval having an arbitrary zero, like the temperature in the room, Fahrenheit. Well, what's 0 Fahrenheit? It's just a point in that someone decided was going to be 0. Okay, it doesn't mean no temperature or no heat or no warmth. And other types of quantities do have 0 that means nothing or none or total absence of that parameter, like weight or revenue, right? So 0 means zip, zilch, nada. So those are broken out indifferently because we can understand ways to compare using these 4 scale types. Nominal just tells us if two things are the same or not equal. Ordinal, because of the fact that the levels are in an order, give us this notion of greater than or less than. Hey, my gold medal is better than that person's silver medal. I wish, right? Someone would say that, not me. Interval, now we can then look at gaps or deltas, like 10 degrees Fahrenheit increase or 5 degrees Fahrenheit increase. But we can't do ratios because 0 doesn't mean none. Like if we say we double the height or double the amount of revenue made, we can say that because height and revenue have a meaningful 0 where 0 means absence of that thing. So these comparisons then inform how we can visualize them. For example, if we talk about t-shirt size, one of these 2 encodings in the bottom left corner is expressive of the fact that small is smaller than medium, which is smaller than large. And it's the icons on the left where the size is encoding the t-shirt size. The color hues on the right-hand side don't convey that notion of order at all. The notion is missing. Sometimes they might show them in the wrong order. Like what if I had, and you might say it's ridiculous to think, but what if I happen to have the small t-shirt icon size is bigger than the medium t-shirt icon size? You'd say that's ridiculous. No one would ever do that. It happens. Let me show you a time when it did. You can go online right now if you want to know about graduation rates. Okay, let's take a look at this. Let's see if I can find a good example for you all. Yeah, who has a higher graduation rate, Florida or Arizona? Give me your gut take, your very first gut reaction, or Florida and Alaska, which has a higher graduation rate, Florida or Alaska. I did this with my home state of Washington and Oregon, and I thought, oh, wow, interesting. I didn't know Washington. I'm a little surprised because of all the funding from Microsoft and Amazon and such that I was surprised that Washington had a lower graduation rate than Arizona. But until I realized, oh, I got that wrong. That's not the case. I looked more closely and I realized that Washington is higher. And they said, wait a second, why was I fooled by that? Why did this thing trick me? And I realized as I look at the legend that the order in the encodings, the shade of green is out of order. So actually 70 to 80 is darker green than 80 to 90. And then 90 and up is the darkest green of all, right? The color encoding was off. We can redo it. I can redo it on the right-hand side here, getting rid of the buckets altogether and just using the continuous variable of graduation rate here, right? So this is an effective way for me to see now that Washington is higher in graduation rate, not only than Oregon, but then also than its other neighbor, Idaho, which wasn't clear in the bucketing, was it? They were the same, Washington and Idaho. Well, now they're not because I got rid of the bins and I created more on a continuous sliding scale. What if I wanted to see which states are above or below? What if I wanted to tell you, and my message to you as I'm communicating data well to you, hopefully, is that, and I think I can just scroll through, yeah, is that I want you to know right away which states in the United States are above the 85.3% national graduation average rate. And that's my goal. And I said, oh, I followed this proper encoding that Ben taught me about. So there's no mix-ups or expressiveness problems. So there you go. So can you just tell me real quick, hey, like list all the states that are above the national graduation rate of 85.3, and you'd say, no, I don't, that's really difficult. I have to look at this scale and figure out where 85.3 is, and then go back to the map and guess which ones are darker and which ones are lighter. So what's the way to do it? You all tell me. What's the way to change this map so that you can very quickly see which states are above and below the national rate and how much above and below? Yeah, so Erica, you nailed it, a diverging color scale. So the sandy, the blank white colored ones, those are the average. The ones like that are a little teal are above, like Illinois and Florida, a little bit above, and Washington, where I live, a little bit above. Places like New Jersey or Iowa, very much above. And then the sandy brownish colored ones are all below, right? So there we go, right? So we can do that. Now the message changed, not based on you, not based on the data, but actually based on my message to you. I would avoid red and blue for a message like this, where it didn't relate to political data in any way. That might be a problem, right? Why? Because we're going to assume this is about Republican, Democrat. So some of these encodings express ideas or concepts that are in the mind of the audience. We need to understand what concepts they're going to have in their mind, what assumptions or conventions. And then we want to minimize the chance that they misapply a convention that's very predictably in their minds, like red and blue, especially a year after an election year. Red and blue, I'm assuming that's political unless you tell me otherwise. I wouldn't do it. I would avoid it. I would give them colors that immediately they need to learn what the colors mean, as opposed to needing to unlearn what the colors mean that they don't mean, but they think they meant. You get it. So those are important questions. Expressiveness, well, left to right tends to express time going forward. Not always, but it's a good rule of thumb. Things that go up are usually more or oftentimes better, but not always, like in the case of COVID data going up. Well, we don't want that at all. It certainly does mean more. More does not always mean better, but these are all things to take into consideration. The other question is not just about expressiveness now, it's about effectiveness. How well does a chart let us do the sorts of things we need to do, right? To carry out the tasks we need to carry out. And effectiveness is largely, or one important consideration in effectiveness oftentimes is how well it lets us understand the true proportions in the data. And this is the most important slide I'm going to show you. And I know we're getting close to being out of time. So let's move along here, right? This idea that we can then rank our encodings on how effective they are at allowing us to decode. Two sides to it, right? On the left-hand side, these are for data scales that that have an order to them. Ordinal, interval, and ratio, they all have an order. On the right-hand side, encoding types for data scales that have no order to them. And we would use different encodings to express those most commonly. And that's this idea that we take their most important variables, we encode with the channels with the highest level of accuracy, like bar charts over areas, for example. And you might say, oh, great, that's why we would choose, for example, a dot plot over using color. And others might say, well, this is exactly why pie charts are evil. See, that proves it. Position and length, those are better than tilt or angle. And others might use this example to say, take a look at these slices of the pie and what do you see? What's different about them? You can see maybe they're slightly different, but try to explain how they're different, the slices, the individual slices. And all I need to do is encode them as bars, and you immediately know why they are different. On the left-hand side, slices getting a little bigger and bigger. On the right-hand side, a little smaller and smaller. I see it, just say no to pie charts. That's what people do with this example. They say, oh, see, this is very ineffective. You don't want to use this example. They're evil. I don't quite agree, actually, with that take. And let me show you why. let's show that Orlando crime data in 4 different ways. And let's say my main message to you is that theft, burglary, and assault together accounted for 3/4 of the reported crimes in Orlando between 2010 and 2017. Theft, burglary, and assault taken together account for 3/4 of the crime. Which of these 4 chart types conveys that very quickly and easily? And my argument would be that the pie chart does. I can see these 3 slices. Maybe I use encoding color a little differently to tell you it's theft, burglary, and assault. Those are our 3 biggest problems. They account for 3/4 of the crime. These don't really tell us that this is all or what percent of the total. I really can't see the 75% there. Maybe I can add labels to tell that. So my point is that, pie charts can be very difficult when it's important to compare part to part, but can sometimes be very helpful when we want to compare part to whole. I love this quote about pie charts. They have been reviled by statisticians unjustifiably and adored by managers unjustifiably. The truth is somewhere in the middle. They're useful, very rare. I rarely use them, but there are times when they hit the mark. On the other hand, same data, right? Same data. If I wanted to tell you that assault was just a tiny bit larger in amount than narcotics, the pie chart is useless for that, right? These slices look exactly the same. Same thing with the circles. Goodness knows the word cloud doesn't do it. But look at that, the bar chart. Yep, I can see it just barely goes past. Assault goes tiny, tiny bit past narcotics, right? So there we go. All right, so I know we're running out of time here. So let's just kind of wrap it up. We want to focus the attention of our audience members on what matters. Well, colors can be confusing and cluttering, or they can focus attention. I tend to try to ask myself to use one and only one, color encoding on a single view, like a dashboard like this sales view, where color just means one thing, region. Here, color means a lot of different things, and it can feel very overwhelming. And it makes my attention scattered and just not coordinated, as well as this type of an experience. It might mean you show less in each view. This view does not show everything that the previous view shows, but what it does show, it shows it more clearly. And so, we need to think about also, are we trying to tell someone a specific message, or are we trying to give them an experience where they can explore the data for themselves? Let me get a time check. I know we're out of time. So what's the best way to handle? I've got more content. Clearly it was way too much for the amount of time here. I probably need another 5 or 10 minutes. Would it be better for me to finish, or would it be better in the interest of time to, maybe do a part 2?
Ben, I would say keep going.
Okay, yeah. Okay, thanks, Yamil. I will do that. So one of the things we talk about in communicating data with Tableau, this is my first book, is that, if I wanted to take, let's say, internet usage rates around the world, I can give you a very easy to use dashboard that lets you explore the data for yourself, looking at regions, looking at types, hovering and seeing things that highlight all over the place. Or I can take the same view, and that's an exploratory dashboard, right? This idea that all I'm doing with this is giving someone the idea to look at this topic for themselves. If I switch into an explanatory mode, I can take this same data and tell you something specific, like the European Nordic countries have been at the top of internet adoption rates since the mid-90s, when the internet first started expanding. And now I've limited the color palette. I'm adding annotations with arrows. Blue now just means those 6 countries, and gray is for everything else. What else am I doing, right? Take a look. What's different about this explanatory version and this exploratory version? Can anyone notice one other thing that's missing that you'll see here in the exploratory view? Look closely, but you won't see it here. Nailed it, Angel and Claire. The filters, right? I don't really want someone to look at only Africa or South America in this explanatory version, because that would be beside the point, which is that we need to understand how the European Nordic countries are so successful in deploying the internet. So this is my point, and that's what I want to limit the conversation to. So letting you filter all the way out or even move the map, right? That was one of the things I got successfully lobbied for at Tableau, was for the map team to lock, pan, and zoom. Sometimes I want to keep it right where it is. Okay, this is an explanatory dashboard. Watch this, same data, totally different point I want to make. Let me switch it to the second story, which is that the total number of internet users in China surged past the United States in 2007, and it's been taking off ever since then, right? So different story, same data. Now, what I did was I switched from the rate, users per 100, to the total amount of users. It's the same data, I just didn't divide by population anymore. Notice also, why did I promote the line chart from the bottom to the top and switch them? I took these two and I swapped them. Why? What was the meaning of that? Can anybody tell me why was that a good idea? Or why was that, maybe even if you think it was a bad idea, I'd love to know. So Angel says the change in story, people read from top to bottom. I am going to look up here first, perhaps, next to the text and the headline. I come down and see this chart right here. And to D Hook's point there, it is a better illustration. You see the quote is, China surges past the United States. Well, the map does not show anything surging. It just shows a snapshot of 1 year, whereas the line chart does show the surge, right? Which of these two charts shows the surge? So the order might change. The metric or calculation might change. The annotations might change. The color choices might change. All of them are focusing my audience's attention on specific points that I want them to think about and see. Okay, subtle changes, layout, color, text annotation, all of that. Great point. I love this book by Cole Knaflic. She's a good friend of mine, Storytelling with Data. You've probably heard of it. It's probably the number one, I don't know. All I know is it's at the top of all the rankings in Amazon. And so it's a book you really should know. And she talks about this exact point, of focusing your audience's attention. A lot of that is eliminating clutter. A lot of that is thinking like a designer. Yeah, this is a book I think many people have. And you can even go through workshops with her and her company that she runs. Some very talented visualization experts will lead workshops to help your team become much better data storytellers. And we were just sort of touching on a couple of the concepts. But to round out that whole idea that, I think it's important for us to think like journalists, only hopefully ones that are being, ethical and complete and thorough. But we want to tell a compelling story, right? And so part of that is, I believe there are two sides to every story. And I don't mean this person's side, that person's side. I'm talking about your message, your presentation. There's a data side and there's a human side. This is a coin. They're both on the same coin. The human side, that includes faces, names, voices, anecdotes, emotions. This shows their impact on real people, how their lives have been affected or could be affected. The tails side is the data side, facts and statistics. Oops, sorry, let me go back there. Charts and graphs, right? Mostly what we've been talking about is the data side. But in order for you to tell a really powerful story, you need to embrace the human side. Here's what that'll allow you to do. It'll give you a message that people are going to remember. There was some research done a few years ago where they were looking at charts and showing them to people. And then they were asking them two questions. One, did you remember seeing this chart before? Yes or no? They would sometimes repeat charts in the list. They would show them very quickly. And then they would ask them, how well do you think you can describe what you see in that chart? Okay, so did they remember it, and how well do they think they can describe it? So there were highly memorable but very confusing charts, like these ones in the top left. Diagrams, people swooshing around. I don't even know what these devices are or what they do. Boxes with arrows going to some place. Hey, what does that mean? I don't even know what that process is, If you show it to me again a little later on, I'll say, yeah, I remember this face looking up with the blue swoop around it. Yeah, I saw that. What is it about? I don't know. So memorable, confusing. On the bottom left corner, they're not very memorable and they're also confusing. These are technical type charts you might see in engineering or in academic journal articles and such, right? They're just bland, they're confusing, they're forgettable. On the bottom right, well, I might be able to describe them, but I'm not going to remember them. Maybe there's some graphic images in there that do or don't hit home. And the most important quadrant we really want to understand is up here in the top right. So these are images that are, these are graphs that have elements to them that I will never forget, like a bunch of dinosaurs. Okay, well, I'll remember that one. There's probably some evolutionary reason why I'll remember all the dinosaurs on the view, or two politicians shaking hands. I know who they are. I see them. I see they're reaching across at each other. I see flags. I know what those flags mean, right? We're going to see that a lot here in the coming few weeks with the Olympics. I know what those flags mean. I can probably describe to you what's going on there fairly easily, right? So top right, these are ways we can design views that are memorable, that people keep in their minds, that they feel confident they can describe, because images wake us up to a human impact, right? Nurses wearing masks so much that they leave marks on their faces. Protests and images of people that stick in our brains. There's a human impact there. I want to understand it. I'll never forget the time. I like hiking, like I said at the beginning. I was walking on this trail all by myself. It was a winter trail, and I was trying out these new spikes I could put on the bottom of my boots to walk on the snow and ice. So I'm walking along, and these two people are coming toward me. And like we do here in Seattle, we wave at each other and say hello and probably smile, and I did. And then all of a sudden, the woman of the couple said, "Oh, I think I know you. Didn't you make that Wayne Gretzky chart?" That's what she said to me. "Didn't you make that Wayne Gretzky chart?" And I was in the middle. I thought, "Oh my gosh, I've achieved data celebrityhood. You know, do you want me to sign something?" And she wanted none of that. I'm just kidding. So I was just like, "Well, yeah, I did make a chart about Wayne Gretzky. It was actually my very first Tableau public visualization I ever made back in 2011, I think it was." And Tableau retweeted it the next day, and I almost fell out of my chair. Here I am a decade later, and this person on this trail in the middle of nowhere outside of Seattle asked me if I'm the person that made the Wayne Gretzky chart. Well, I'll tell you, this is the Wayne Gretzky chart, only it wasn't quite like this, right? And if it was like this, I would not probably have had that conversation with that woman at all. It's like this. This is what the Wayne Gretzky chart looked like. I remember when I first put it out there, this is a long time ago, I was very afraid it was chart junk. I was very afraid people were going to ridicule it. I actually needed to buy the image from Getty to put it on there, but I loved how Wayne Gretzky was swiping through these other dots. And then here he was up in the top up here, right by his helmet. And this was much more memorable. This is why the person asked me that question on the trail. And, I communicated data in a way that stuck. And this is, I think, maybe this is using Tableau. I was using a background image behind a scatter plot. So there we go, right? So we can also, you too can be a data celebrity and get called out in public for your chart that you made. No, I'm just kidding. But she and I happened to be on a panel together at the Washington Athletic Club, I think maybe a year before we bumped into each other on the trail. So it was probably more me being very forgettable than it was her being, or me being so remarkably memorable. But there you go. I'm pretty sure she would not have asked me about Wayne Gretzky if the photograph was not there behind the dots. Okay, that's my point. I can't test that, but that's my assumption. I remember presenting data to execs once about a medical device, and we were talking about launching 2 products, right, with different colors. And I was afraid they were going to be looking at it was a long time ago, so BlackBerries all day. We were doing a whole day of product reviews, and these were the top execs of a big medical device company. And I was the first person after lunch, probably, I think, as my luck would have it. And I was like, well, if I just show them this, they're just going to gloss over it. They're not even going to look at it. I really needed them to know that we probably should be launching the other color in configuration B. I also knew that our customers were, some of them, pretty upset and irate. So I changed it up a bit. I put some social media quotes in there with some photographs and text of people booing us. I played a phone call to our helpline where someone begging us, And so I was adding the anecdotal human side to the story while also paying homage and incorporating into the message the statistical reality of the situation. So I wasn't just pulling their heartstrings in a way that wasn't telling them something that the data didn't also tell. But I realized I needed to tell them both. I needed to tell both sides of that story for them to pay attention, for them to remember. They weren't making any decisions in that meeting, but I remember a few weeks later, they reached out to me and said, hey, let's launch that other color in the other configuration. We were talking about budget for the coming quarter, and we'd like to allocate some money to do that. And so I needed them to remember it. I knew that in order for them to remember it, I needed to include human stuff in it, not just data stuff in it. So that's a key message. And of course, this is a double-edged sword. This is something we can use to great effect, both to convince and also to mislead. And so I put that very powerful tool in your hands, like what is it with Spider-Man, right? With great power comes great responsibility. So it's up to you to apply it in a way that does justice to the data. Okay. I really love the late Hans Rosling and his data storytelling, and watching animation is a relatively new feature in Tableau. You can actually put the data into motion. And I definitely believe that doing that, at least what I've seen from Mr. Rosling, I had a chance to meet him at a Tableau conference. Funny story about that sometime that involves me buying him toilet paper, but I'll have to save that story for another day. I will say it was the highlight of my data career and always will be. But Hans was an expert at bringing data to life. And so if you want to become an expert data storyteller and really communicate data well, just Google him. I'll just do it for you real quick and put the link in there. I think it's so important for you to know this. Hans Rosling. And we'll say TED Talk. Most important, let's see, what's it called? The best stats you've ever seen. Here we go. It's a TED Talk. One of the early TED Talks, I think, maybe one of the first ones. And it has over like 15 million views now. So let me put that in there. And I think this pretty much wraps it up for me. I'll end on a high note with Mr. Rosling. There you go. Those are some tips I think that might be helpful for you as you look to become a more powerful data presenter and communicator. It's one of the most important skills you can have right now. And so I see a lot of different people in every department, every industry, every experience level trying to get better at this. You can differentiate yourself. Tools like Tableau let you do that. Skills and knowledge like I'm exposing you to a little bit here. And you also probably have many, many lessons that you could teach me and each other about how to communicate data well. So I'll wrap it up there. Sorry for going overtime a full 15 minutes. That's a big no-no. Speaking of communicating well, get your timelines right. But we covered a little more than maybe I had time for. So thanks anyway for hanging in there with me. Here's where you can get a hold of me. My company trains on these topics and concepts. We'll be happy to help you out too. And with that, let me stop talking. I know that we're going to get some winners in place here. So let me turn it back over to you, Jeffrey, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Ben. Wow. Awesome. I know that I'm speaking for everyone at the Tug that we really, really appreciate you taking the time out to go over, this incredibly great session today. I know that there's so much going on in our world that's data relevant, and you can tell by the folks that hung in with us that, everything you shared was just exceptional. So just exactly what we expected. We do have a couple of winners picked out for the giveaway today. Ben, I sent those names over to you. Do you want to share who our winners are?
Sure, let's do it. I have to go back through the chat here. Thanks for all the... Oh, I got it. I see it. Okay, great. So the winner, we have two winners. The first winner actually wins a course. So what do I mean by that? If you go to dataliteracy.com, you can go, we've been working on, that's the wrong one to go to. Hold on, let me see, dataliteracy.com. We've been working on making on-demand courses. We also do these live, but we're going to give away the level 1 course, which is really, I think, more helpful for people that are already in the data world. Working on level 2 right now. But basically, you can see, anyone can see the first lesson for free, which covers some of these principles we talked about, like expressiveness and effectiveness. That lesson is just out there for anyone. So I'll put that in the chat here. And the winner of that, which has a $299 retail value, wow, is Krista Thompson. I love that name. That's my little sister's name, and even spelled the same way. So Krista, congratulations on winning that. I'll follow up with you. I'll tell you what, best way to do that, I think, just so that you don't have to provide any of your personal identifiable information in the chat, is I'll put my email address I'm at bjones@dataliteracy.com. There it is in the chat. Krista reached, I see you commenting in there. That's great. I'm glad you stuck around, and just shoot me an email. We'll get you a discount code for 100% off. And there you go. The next winner wins the book, Learning to See Data. It's actually included, ebook is included in the course. And what we'll do with this is I'll let the person choose if they want to ebook or a hard copy version of the book, which we'll send on out to you. And that person, ironically, is my brother's name. So it's Matthew.
Wow.
I think it's Saz. So Matthew is, this is crazy. So you win as well. You win a copy of the book. You can pick which one you want. And congrats to you. And there you are. Great. So thanks for commenting so that you heard and saw. So shoot me an email to bjones@dataliteracy.com. Let me know if you want print or e-book, and we'll get it on out to you right away. So, and thanks for doing the work there, Jeffrey, to pick the winners. And I'll turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Great. Ben, thanks so much. I mean, that's the uniqueness of being random, right? So random, and yet there's connection. And, you know, what a wonderful thing. So seriously, thank you, Ben, for sharing with us today. I know you've just impacted our community in ways that's going to help all of us grow. And we just can't wait until we have you back again. So we'll find a time to do this again in the future and just continue to help each of us along. So thank you so much from all of us. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes. So just a couple of things. We do have some Tableau job openings. We'll be sending out our PowerPoint deck. We'll be posting the recording of this session in our Orlando Tug group on LinkedIn. If you're not connected with us there, please feel free to reach out to me, Katie, Yamil, Andrew. Any of us can kind of help get you into that group. And there you can capture the recording, and then also we'll have the PowerPoint deck. And as we all know, Ben just mentioned, you know, one of the greatest skills that we have right now is developing the language of data and being able to tell stories with it. And as you can see, there are lots of opportunities out there. So just encourage you to check those out. Our next session is going to be coming up in August. Whoops, my screen has just done something completely different than what I wanted. What a shock. What happened? There we go. And there we go. Let me try this one more time. See if I can click the button and not launch something different. Nope, not having it quit that. So you all get to see me navigate a PowerPoint slide when it's not doing what I want it to do. And okay, never mind. Let's do that. Hey, there we go. So our next meeting is going to be August the 19th. We're shooting for a social event. So we're not really sure exactly what that means yet, but it's going to be more interactive, and we're going to get to connect as a group. So be on the lookout for that coming up in our next session. And again, we thank you all for joining us today. Thanks to Ben for tuning in and, you know, just giving us his level of expertise and helping each of us. So thank you all for attending. So that's pretty much it. So everybody have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Ben.